Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. So we have some great news for women's sports. After a few disappointments, some of these cases that these brave women have put forward, they've gone to court contesting, various policies that have infringed upon their sports, that have infringed upon their spaces. So the young female athletes in Connecticut, last year, they filed a lawsuit against the policy that allows transgender athletes to compete in female categories. The female athletes in question, I believe it was 4 of them, they argued that their career, the course of their career, was changed due to having to compete against these male athletes. They argued that if they hadn't had to compete against males, their careers would have turned out differently. They would have had more scholarship opportunities, they would have had more accolades. And one of them was at one point labelled the fastest girl in Connecticut. Even she had her career derailed as a result of this unfair policy of having to compete against biological males, most of whom have an unfair advantage against women. So the initial lawsuit was thrown out. The Court of Appeal dismissed the case, saying that there wasn't sufficient evidence that these female athletes really were put at a disadvantage. At the time, the judge said, all 4 plaintiffs regularly competed at state track championships as high school athletes, where plaintiffs had the opportunity to compete for state titles in different events. And on numerous occasions, plaintiffs were indeed champions, finishing first in various events, even sometimes when competing against the transgender athletes. Plaintiffs simply have not been deprived of a chance to be champions. So you see what the judge did there. The judge basically decided that you have won on occasion. You have been declared champions on occasion. So what does it matter? You've won a couple of championships, so what are you complaining about, basically? Never mind the fact that the number of championships they won could have been double. The scholarship opportunities may have been more had they not lost to people who shouldn't have even been there in the first place, to athletes that were in the wrong category to begin with, athletes who have an unfair advantage, who essentially are licensed cheaters. So that was what happened last year. Take a look.
After years of legal back and forth, a federal appeals court has dismissed a lawsuit that claimed Connecticut's policy on transgender athletes is unfair to other students.
I really hope that this victory will help us ensure that no student in Connecticut is denied opportunities because of who they are.
4 cisgender female athletes claimed they were robbed of opportunities for wins, titles, and scholarships because they had to compete against 2 transgender girls in track and field. The CIAC's policy states that students can compete on the athletic teams of the gender they identify with.
The court got it wrong. Our clients deserve the right to compete in competition fairly, and that just does not happen when you allow biological males to come in and to dominate women's sports.
Alliance Defending Freedom represented the plaintiffs.
So thankfully, that was last year. Fast forward to 2023, we have good news.
The Federal Appeals Court has revived the lawsuit over the state's rule that allows transgender girls to compete in female school sports teams. So this means opponents of that policy will get a second chance to challenge it. That lawsuit had been dismissed by a district judge back in Connecticut in 2021. The plaintiffs are 4 women now competing in college who sued to prevent transgender student athletes from track competitions. They claim they were at a disadvantage competing against 2 transgender athletes. The American Civil Liberties Union will be defending those transgender runners, and the Alliance Defending Freedom is representing those 4 athletes who brought the suit. Attorney General William Tong releasing a statement about this, saying in part, quote, "It is the law in Connecticut that transgender girls are girls, and every woman and girl deserves protection against discrimination." That case now goes back to the same judge who threw it out.
Their case has been reinstated and it's been ruled that they have every right to pursue this case. They have every right to argue in court and to highlight what they have been denied, having to compete against trans-identified males. So the Alliance Defending Freedom represented these young ladies, and they have a summary of the ruling. So the full US Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit reinstated the case of 4 female athletes deprived of honours and opportunities at elite track and field levels by male athletes permitted to compete against them. Alliance Defending Freedom attorneys represent the athletes, Selena Soule, Chelsea Mitchell, Alana Smith, and Ashley Nicoletti, who suffered the defeats because the Connecticut Interscholastic Athletics Conference adopted a policy that allows males who identify as female to compete in girls' athletic events. So all 15 members of the panel of judges, they ruled that the plaintiffs have plausibly stated an injury in fact. The alleged denial of equal athletic opportunity and concomitant loss of publicly recognised titles and placements during track and field competitions in which they participated against and finished behind two males identifying as females. So it's good to hear that the courts made the right decision this time. And these young ladies are going to be given an opportunity to have their day in court, to fight for their sports, to fight for other girls who are coming behind them. And, they're looking back at their careers thinking, this is where I could have been if I didn't lose to these male athletes. Things would have turned out differently. And yes, they could have lost to other female athletes, but we will never know now because they lost to people who should not have been in their sports to begin with. The fastest girl in Connecticut wasn't even shielded from the consequences of this policy. Even she was affected. Now, we can imagine the athletes who weren't as successful as her. They were denied opportunities too. They would have been denied opportunities to qualify for certain events, to even be at certain championships. Imagine just missing out on qualifying because there's two males that take second and first place. And I just want to draw your attention to NBC News' headline. They're still insisting on using the term cisgender, which many people now agree is actually a slur. And their headline makes no sense because they don't know what a woman is. A federal court will allow 4 cisgender runners to sue over Connecticut's trans-inclusive policy, which they say deprive them of honors and opportunities. Who's the female and who's the male? Apparently, NBC News doesn't know the difference between male and female. And I'm making it difficult for the reader to decipher that from their headline. And you can call it a trans-inclusive policy all you want, but what it is a policy that makes women's sports unfair. It's a policy that denies women their rightful protection under Title IX. No one is saying that if you happen to be trans, you cannot compete in sports. No one is trying to fight to stop trans people competing in sports. All we're saying is that they need to be in the correct category. So if they win their court case, it is going to be monumental for the fight for women's sports, for the fight for fairness. So I wish these young ladies all the best.
Welcome back to Fox and Friends, and it's a win for actual women. An appeals court revives a challenge to Connecticut's transgender sports policy brought by former high school runners who argued that racing against biological men deprived them of winning competitions. And they join us now. They're Chelsea Mitchell, Selena Soule, and Alana Smith. They're here along with their Alliance for Defending Freedom Senior Counsel, Christiana Kiefer. Welcome to all of you beautiful ladies. I'm going to start with you, Chelsea. You had to race against 2 biological males. How important is it that you'll be able to state your case here in a court?
Yeah, I'm really excited. I mean, we filed this lawsuit 4 years ago, so to finally be able to get our case heard in trial is really exciting.
All right, and Selena, just talk to me about some of the opportunities that you've lost along the way.
So by being forced to compete against 2 biological males throughout all 4 years of high school and racing against them dozens of times, I lost out on different medals, higher placements, higher finishes, and qualifying opportunities, like qualifying for the 2019 Indoor New England Championships. I was essentially robbed of competing in that meet because the top 2 spots were taken by biological males. And it was a very unfair thing for us to go through, and I'm very excited that we are now able to have our full case tried in court.
That's exactly what I said. It literally stops people even qualifying. They don't even get an opportunity to go to certain competitions because of these males taking their spot. And the fact is, you cannot turn back time, especially in sports. This is opportunities that can never, no amount of money can actually make up for the opportunities that were lost, unfortunately. But it's the principle of it. Obviously, this policy, the people who are responsible for this policy, need to be held accountable. And this policy needs to be challenged and changed. And it just breaks my heart that young women are having to go through this. They're having to go to court, which costs money. You know, if you lose a case like they did last year, it's devastating. They shouldn't be dealing with this. They should just be enjoying themselves, participating in sports, working hard, training, focusing on their studies. That's it. But now these young women have to go through this battle. Young women from the Kappa Kappa Gamma sorority who are fighting to protect their spaces as well. You know, hoping all the best for them too, because these cases are going to ensure that my daughter doesn't have to go through this and other people's daughters don't have to go through this. It's very, very sad that they are being put through this to begin with.
You know, Lana, one of the things that's been so surprising to me is, and I guess just the reality, is just how difficult it's been for athletes like yourselves to step forward. There's a lot of backlash from that happens. And so people like Chelsea, I've spoken to Chelsea before. She's been, you know, out and talking about it. How important has it been to have people like Chelsea or a big voice like Riley Gaines sort of out there talking about it and making it easier for athletes like yourself to step forward, in this case suing, but even just talking about it?
It's been very important because especially with social media, you know, we get a lot of backlash, but it's mostly from people that we don't know, people that hide behind screens, and we have a huge community that supports us. And like you said, having more people speaking out, it makes you feel safer, but also it's an important topic that needs to be talked about, and we don't want to become sidelined in our own sports.
That's exactly what this is about. How dare these policymakers sideline women in their own sports? Perfectly put. How dare they do that? Sidelining these young girls in a sport that was created for them. Women's sports is for women. It's very simple.
Yeah, just to give our viewers an idea, and any one of you can jump in here, what does that backlash look like online? What do those people say online to silence you?
So I have been fighting for this issue since 2018.
You have?
And I have been called plenty of names from people online, but I don't pay attention to any of the negativity. I focus on all the messages of love and support that I've gotten, not only from people in our country, but across the world.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you can do that. The problem is, and I have 9 kids, so some of my kids could withstand that kind of pressure, just like you girls, you ladies are, and others, it might crush them. And that's what's been so disappointing, is there hasn't been enough adults. And frankly, the feminist movement, the so-called sisterhood, hasn't been there for you girls. And that's what's been, for me, so frustrating to see. And that's why I applaud you all. Christiana, you've been there for them, the Alliance for Defending Freedom. What do you expect to happen in this court case?
So this was a great win for female athletes. And what the Second Circuit essentially said was the girls deserve their day in court. They deserve to make their full case under Title IX. So it's been Alliance Defending Freedom's privilege to stand alongside them for years now. And we look forward to continuing to seek justice for these young women and to get their records corrected because they were forced to compete against males throughout all of their time in high school.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry that you ladies had to go through with all of this. I'm sorry that you lost opportunities. I'm sorry that the so-called feminists weren't there for you. But I would say that the torch has been handed to you. You are the true champions of females, of biological females. You are on the forefront. You are the new leaders. It's now up to you. And we wish you all the best of luck in your court case. Just personally, I'm so very proud of you. Bravo.
Guys, I had to stop filming for a few minutes because I had to compose myself. That literally made me well up. And yes, these are young ladies to be proud of. They're putting themselves out there, dealing with all the backlash, which they do not deserve, obviously. And yeah, this is the future. So feminists, are you going to support these beautiful young ladies who are simply fighting for fairness? Or are you going to be on the side of biological men who want a license to cheat, who want to infringe upon what is not theirs, what doesn't belong to them? You notice how a lot of these athletes, these trans athletes, they were mediocre or less than mediocre when they had to compete in the correct category. But now they're using women's sports to make a name for themselves. Now that's not against, very young athletes who, some of them may be still in their teens. That's not to speak against, them personally. And technically, because of the policy, they're not breaking the rules. This is what they have been enabled to do. So it's the policymakers who need to be held accountable. It's the policymakers that are at fault here, first and foremost. And they're going to be responsible for destroying women's sports. They're going to be responsible for ruining the careers of many girls, of many women. But obviously, if you're like some 50-year-old man who wants to compete against 13-year-olds, then yeah, you're at fault. If you're someone in their 40s who knows better, then yeah, I'm going to give you the side eye. And people who go along with it, especially the feminists, you are enabling it. You are enabling cheating. You're enabling people who already have a very self-centered way of thinking to really believe that it's all about them and to dismiss the concerns and the pain that these female athletes are going through. Sometimes physically, because we know that they're more likely to be injured when competing against a male, but also emotionally. What they're going through counts too and matters, because this is literally destroying women's sports and robbing women of the career that they rightfully deserved. It's robbing them. So, feminists, these are young ladies that you need to get behind. If you claim to care about women, why would you demonize what these young ladies are doing? What they're doing is honorable. So great news from the courts, and we're obviously behind them and wish them all the best in their court case. So let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Take care of yourselves, and God willing, I will see you in the next video.